Hello everyone, life often surprises you unexpectedly. That's exactly what occurred to me on an otherwise ordinary Wednesday evening. I had just returned from work. My heels tapping across the wooden floor as I entered the home. The day had been long and exhausting, and all I wanted to do was relax in a hot bath and let the stress wash away. Little did I realize that evening would leave an everlasting impression on my life altering the direction of everything in our home. Make sure to subscribe to my channel so I can keep giving you intriguing, genuine tales like these. Don't forget to watch this video till the conclusion. And please like the video because this narrative will be quite intriguing. Please click the like button to express your support. The home was silent as I arrived, which was not unusual. My husband, Thomas, had said earlier in the day that he would be attending a late meeting. He'd been working long hours lately, attempting to meet a major project deadline. This left just Logan, Thomas's kid from his previous marriage, at home. Logan, 20, was a shy but charming young guy who rarely created difficulty. He worked part-time at the local hardware shop and spent the majority of his leisure time in his room. Though we were not particularly close, we had a pleasant friendship based on mutual respect. I'd always thought of him as someone who respected his space and solitude, much like his father. I had become accustomed to the tranquility of the house when there were only the two of us. As I placed my suitcase on the kitchen counter and got myself a drink of water, I spotted Logan's pickup parked in the driveway. Odd, I thought. He frequently worked the late shift. I nonchalantly shouted out his name, and my voice echoed around the empty home. No answer. I didn't think much of it because I assumed he was in his room, perhaps listening to music or asleep. After drinking my water, I decided to go upstairs and change into something more comfortable. After such a long day, all I wanted to do was rest. As I passed by the bathroom, I noted the faint sound of running water and the slightly open door. This struck me as unusual. Logan was very particular about privacy. He always locked doors tightly, especially the bathroom door. My interest piqued. I paused for a bit before softly pulling the door open somewhat more. What I saw brought me to a halt. Logan was standing by the sink, his back turned to me. And his shoulders slumped in a way that suggested he was focused on something. His motions were uncomfortable, almost frenzied, and I realized he was shirtless, with his pants falling loosely over his hips. He looked to be holding a washcloth and washing something out of sight. The creak in the door shocked him. He turned around, his eyes wild with fear. "Oh my God, I didn't hear you enter," he shouted, his voice trembling. I froze, equally astonished. I shifted my gaze between him and the washcloth, feeling a wave of uneasiness sweep over me. It wasn't what I expected to see when I walked in, and I couldn't help but feel awful for invading. "I'm very sorry," I mumbled, shifting my gaze away. "I did not mean to intrude." I took a rapid step back, my heart beating in my chest. I grabbed for the doorknob, ready to retire and offer him the solitude he obviously desired. But before I could lock the door, Logan's voice interrupted me. "Wait," he asked, his tone begging. "It's not as you think." I paused, my hand hanging over the doorknob. Half of me wanted to flee down the corridor and pretend nothing had occurred, but another half was intrigued. His voice did not convey the defensiveness of someone caught doing something wrong. Instead, it was full of humiliation and despair. Despite my better judgment, I turned back to face him, my gaze fixed on his features. "Okay," I said carefully, attempting to maintain a neutral tone. "What's happening?" Logan glanced down, his cheeks flushed a deep scarlet. He appeared to be trying for the appropriate words, his hands fumbling with the washcloth. Finally, he let out a long sigh and said, "I just didn't know who else to ask." "What exactly are you asking about?" I pressed lightly, my interest growing despite the unpleasantness of the circumstances. He shuffled uneasily and avoided eye contact. It's personal, he conceded. I've been struggling with some issues, and I'm not sure what to do. Dad is not here. And you are the only one I can talk to. I was surprised by his vulnerability. Logan had always maintained his independence, rarely disclosing personal information. The idea that he was looking to me for assistance gave me pause. I stepped into the bathroom. I shut the door slightly behind me to give us some privacy. Okay, I said, keeping my tone neutral. Why don't you tell me what's happening? Logan hesitated before trying to explain. At first, his words were hazy as he struggled to convey the agony he was experiencing. I attentively listened, attempting to piece together what he was saying. It quickly became evident that this was a delicate subject, one that he was too embarrassed to address with Dad. As he spoke, I couldn't help but feel a sense of empathy. It's never straightforward to ask for help, especially with something so personal. I could see the strain in his eyes, the internal conflict between wanting to seek help and being terrified of being judged. Okay, I said after a moment of reflection. First and foremost, it's excellent that you're paying attention to these details. It demonstrates that you care about your health. Second, there is no shame in asking questions or getting guidance. Logan gazed up at me, his eyes full of appreciation and relief. Really? You don't think this is strange? Not at all, I reassured him. Everyone has questions about their bodies from time to time. It's normal. Topic as realistic and straightforward as possible, avoiding anything that may make him feel more uncomfortable. I could tell this chat was a big relief for him, even if it began awkwardly. As the talk went on, the initial uneasiness subsided. Logan appeared to relax, and I could see he was glad to have someone to chat with. He appeared to be more at ease by the end of our conversation. He even managed a little smile. Thank you, he replied slowly, his voice hardly a whisper. I didn't think I could tell anyone about this. I returned his grin, relieved that the tension had lifted. You're welcome, Logan. Remember that it is never inappropriate to seek assistance. No one knows all the answers. As I exited the toilet, I couldn't help but have a peculiar mix of feelings. On the one hand, I was pleased to be there for Logan when he needed someone to talk to. On the other hand, the incident had been so unexpected and out of the norm that I had no idea how to handle it. Something about the event felt momentous, as if it represented a transition in our relationship. I just wasn't sure what it meant or how it would play out in the next few days. I tried to dismiss the unusual sensation as I went about my evening, but it persisted in the back of my mind. Like a shadow. The home was peaceful, with only the gentle hum of the air conditioner. Thomas arrived home late that night, exhausted yet pleased. He was absolutely oblivious to the unusual talk that had occurred during his absence. As I lay in bed that night, looking at the ceiling, I couldn't help but think about the events of the evening. Something had changed, but I couldn't quite pinpoint it. All I knew was that life in our home will never be the same again. The days after that unexpected encounter were unusual, to say the least. Nothing very dramatic occurred. In fact, everything on the surface seemed normal. Thomas continued with his tasks as usual, Logan stuck to his part-time shift and study schedule, while I continued to balance my home and work duties. But behind the surface, Logan and I had an unsaid but susceptible tension. It wasn't only that we were more conscious of one another's vulnerabilities, it was something deeper. A shift in the dynamic had happened, and I was unsure how to deal with it. Logan had always eluded me, concealing the majority of his life from me. Our interactions, while friendly, had never progressed beyond surface-level niceties. But suddenly, following our toilet discussion, I sensed a new level of understanding between us, one that was both unpleasant and strangely soothing. I found myself thinking about him more than necessary, not in a motherly or concerned manner, but with a sense of astonishment at how I had not seen this part of him before. realizing Logan was more than just the quiet young man who kept to himself. There was a depth to him, an emotional world that I had only begun to comprehend. Logan's conduct changed more noticeably on Friday evening. Thomas had left to meet with a client, and I was making dinner. Logan was yet to return from his shift at the hardware shop. I was cutting veggies when I heard his pickup come into the driveway. I froze, my knife in midair, pondering how I should welcome him. The discomfort that had settled between us over the previous several days had formed a barrier that I wasn't sure how to break down. When the front door opened, I cried out, "Hey Logan," trying to sound nonchalant. He did not respond immediately, but I heard his footsteps as he entered the kitchen. He seemed exhausted, yet smiled weakly. "Hey," he replied gently. "What's for dinner?" I smiled back, pleased that he wasn't as distant as he had been in recent days. "Just some spaghetti." "Are you hungry?" "Yes, I am hungry," he responded, stepping over to the counter to get a drink of water. We ate in quiet at first, with the only sound being the clink of forks on plates. But I saw Logan appear more relaxed than he had in days. His grin appeared more genuine, and his body language was less rigid. He laid down his fork and gazed at me, a small blush on his cheeks. "I've been thinking about what you said the other night," he began. I paused for a second before continuing, "and I just wanted to thank you again for listening." I looked up from my plate and met his gaze. The honesty in his speech was enough to soothe my heart. I'd been waiting for this moment, wondering how to answer, but relieved that he felt safe enough to talk. "Of course, Logan," I said, my tone mild. "I'm delighted I could assist." There was another long wait, but this time I didn't feel as uneasy as I had before. It seemed like we were actually chatting rather than simply filling the space with polite chatter. "You've always been polite to me," he said, his voice softer now. "And I don't want you to think I don't appreciate it." I nodded, uncertain how to communicate how important his words were to me. "I understand. It isn't always easy," I added after a minute. "But I'm pleased you know you can talk to me at any time." He grinned again, this time a bit more relaxed. "I'll try to remember that," he responded, grabbing for another slice of spaghetti. As supper continued, we became more informal in our conversations. We discussed his schooling, his part-time work, and the newest Netflix show we were both watching. It was a little step forward, but one nonetheless. Logan was beginning to open. Despite the awkwardness of our initial talk, in tiny ways later that evening, once we had done eating, I laid down on the couch to relax with a book. Logan retreated to his room, his footfall gentle on the floor. I couldn't help but wonder whether he was still absorbing what we talked about. The following few days were much of the same. Thomas returned home later each night as his work required more and more of his time. Logan, while less distant than before, continued to keep to himself. In many respects. We had brief but meaningful talks over dinner, and he appeared more at ease around me, but there remained an underlying tension that neither of us felt eager to confront. Logan did something absolutely unexpected on one of those peaceful evenings, perhaps a week after our chat in the toilet. It was almost bedtime, and I was wrapped up on the couch, watching the most recent episode of a drama. Logan suddenly emerged in the doorway, his look inscrutable. "Can I speak to you?" he inquired, his voice barely above a whisper. I sat up suddenly, wondering what to anticipate. "Of course, come in." He stopped for a time before fully entering the room. He appeared nervous, his stance tight, as if he didn't know what he was going to say. "What is on your mind?" I inquired softly, hoping to establish a secure environment for him. Logan moved from foot to foot, briefly averting my gaze before replying. "I've been thinking about the things I told you about, and I believe I need to tell Dad. I'm not sure how, but I believe he needs to understand what I'm going through." I was astounded by his statements. He was more vulnerable now than he had been previously. This was a step forward. He was accepting responsibility for his sentiments and admitting that he needed support from Thomas, not just myself. I smiled, hoping to comfort him. "Logan, that's a huge step. And I believe Thomas will appreciate you coming to him. It is not easy, but it is necessary." He nodded, his gaze catching mine. There was a glimmer of thankfulness in his eyes. And I could tell that the decision to talk with Thomas was difficult for him. But he had gone a long way. He whispered gently, "I don't want to make things weird between us. I realize things have been different recently." I shook my head, feeling a surge of affection for him. "It's not strange at all," I told him. "Logan, we are family. Whatever the circumstances. We always aid one another." He offered me a little smile and nodded before turning to go. "Thank you for everything," he said over his shoulder as he exited the room. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. I felt a strong sense of pride for him. He was learning to communicate, seek help, and manage his emotions in a healthy manner. I couldn't help but feel like I was seeing an important time in his development. The following day, Thomas arrived home from work earlier than normal. I could see tiredness on his face, however. His steps were light as he stepped in the door. "Hey," he murmured, dropping his briefcase near the door. "How are things going?" "Good," I said, smiling. "However, I believe Logan is thinking about something." Thomas lifted his eyebrow. "What do you mean?" "He's been more open recently," I said. "And he said he wanted to speak with you about something important." Thomas's countenance softened with a mix of anxiety and eagerness on his face. "I will talk to him," he stated with calm conviction in his voice. "Thank you for telling me." That evening, after supper, Thomas and Logan sat together in the living room. I couldn't hear much of their talk. But I noticed Logan leaning in and conversing passionately with his father. Thomas listened closely, his expression filled with both worry and warmth. I observed that Logan's transition into maturity marked a significant turning point in their relationship, and Thomas was prepared to meet him there. As the weeks passed, life resumed its normal pattern. Logan and I's unsaid tension dissipated over time. He no longer avoided me, and I could see he was still absorbing what he'd said. But he appeared lighter and more himself. Thomas and Logan spent more time together, which strengthened their relationship, and Thomas was clearly trying to be more present for his kid. One weekend, Thomas recommended we go on a day excursion to the lake. It was his attempt to build our friendship, and I felt it was an excellent idea. The weather was ideal, with beautiful blue skies and a mild wind. We packed a lunch, drove to the lake, and spent the day relaxing and having fun. We spent hours swimming, playing frisbee, and relaxing on the beach. Logan appeared to be truly pleased, smiling and joking with Thomas in a way I'd never seen before. Watching them interact thrilled my heart. And I hoped that this trip would mark a significant turning point for all of us. As the sun began to set, spreading golden hues over the lake, we sat on the beach, relishing the last moments of the day. Thomas had fallen asleep on a blanket, his snores blending with the sound of the waves. Logan and I sat a few feet apart, looking at the horizon. "Thank you for coming today," he murmured after a lengthy quiet. "It has been lovely just spending time together." I grinned and felt a sensation of calm rush over me. "I'm happy. We should do stuff like this more frequently." He nodded, his attention focused on the ocean. "Yes, I believe it helps." We sat quietly for a little longer, our unsaid understanding filling the stillness. When Thomas awoke, we collected our belongings and drove home, brimming with laughter and memories from the day. That night, as I lay in bed next to Thomas, I reflected on how far we had come as a family. The last 2 weeks had been difficult, but they also drew us closer together in ways I hadn't expected. Logan's journey was far from done, but I was convinced that he and we were on the right track.